Today I'm going to talk about, again, emotions and spirituality. Mainly because I feel a little raw myself, a little depressed, a little hurt. So, let's start. You know, the human being is exceptionally extraordinary and exceptionally complicated. And most spirituality tends to oversimplify the nature of human life and make it into something simple and easy to understand. Like you're not the body, you're not the mind, you're a true self of some sort. Nisargadatta referred to it as being the absolute Parabrahman, the witness. Other teachers say you're the nowness, the beingness. When the mind stops, you're just in the nowness, and that's your real nature. And in this nowness, there's peace and there's no opposition. Others say that, especially the non-dualists, it's all one. There's no separate self. Others have you just observe emotions and negativity arise when it arises. Pass no judgment and let it go through. Other spiritualities like Ramakrishna are completely devotional. He devoted himself completely to Kali and the various gurus he studied with. Just total surrender and bhakti. Just total love. And the bhakta attitude seems to have left American spiritual life about 50 years ago. There's not much emphasis on it. There's some who talk about loving the guru or loving God, but basically spirituality today is very heady, very much a knowledge kind of thing. Whether it's Nisargadatta, Ramana, Robert Adams. And the methods are to reveal emptiness, that matrix within which all experience lies. The external experience of the world is, we call space as a container. Internally, some call it the matrix of consciousness. And feelings come and go, and thoughts come and go, and ideas come and go, and images come and go. And the energies of the subtle body come and go, and the bliss comes and goes, all the subjective sensations. And they say that all of these are changing, and none of them stay around, so they're not real. Because they have a beginning and an end. The only real thing is the container that doesn't change, the emptiness inside, the illumined consciousness. This is such a oversimplification. It shutters you down from the glorious being you are, of being human, being alive, just the miracle of being alive, being able to perceive and to feel, to love and to hate, to have anger, to have passion, to be depressed, to fear the loss of someone who you love, to fear your own death, to feel the death of an animal in your life that's very dear to you, or of a partner, or of a parent, or of a child, and feel the devastation of that loss. Animals feel it, but spiritual people think that they have to get away from those kinds of feelings into something more simple. Simple where they don't have these horrible feelings of depression, loss, rage, anger. But in the attempt to get away from those negative feelings, they also get away from the positive feelings. Because the emotional receptors are the same for both. So if you repress the negative feelings by trying to get away, by chanting, by diving deep inside of oneself, looking for the self, feeling the I am, whatever it is you do, you're also closing off the positive emotions such as love, joy, happiness, bliss even, all the ecstatic states. But when you come to somebody like me who says, these teachers have been robbing you of your life by cutting off your feelings. And I'm saying you have to allow for a radical kind of honesty to yourself about what's going on inside of you. And I don't mean by that a violent openness, or I just mean the courage to go inside of yourself and to feel what's there honestly and not try to run from it, but allow whatever is there to flower, to explode, to come forth. So you know what's there. And often, because most of us run from negative feelings, the stuff that comes up when we start going inside in spirituality is the negative feelings. Depression, anger, fear. One of our members was a soldier, and he remembers the corruption and the destructiveness of the American forces in Vietnam, and how much he was hated because of his hatred of how brutal they were. And he deals with that now constantly, and has brushes, let's say, with nervous breakdowns, whatever those are. Many of us do. Cindria has whole mountains of complexes of emotions coming out, some slowly, most rapidly. Feels like she's going to blow her head off. Same with a lot of other people here in the Satsang, in our Sangha. And we feel like, geez, we've been doing spirituality for 20 years. And it's all been about running to the absolute, or to silence, or to the container of existence, the matrix of consciousness. And now we're told we have to get back into our emotions. You know, by the time people come to me in spirituality, their emotional life has been all screwed up by reading too many spiritual books, doing too many practices, and getting too far away from their emotional roots, their human roots. So I emphasize over and over and over again, exposing oneself to the needy self within, the feelings of not having had enough love, the anger we have of not having enough love, the anger we have at people who have denied us in our childhood, or other soldiers in the war, or people we've lived with during 20 years of spiritual practice. I've been told, for example, that my teacher, one of my teachers, Sansanim, that Zen is in poor shape since he died. The teachers are not too good because they're very narrow, and they teach exactly like Sun Tzu did, with the same books, the same phrases, and it's by rote. Nothing like the living intensity and charisma he had. And what I want for you guys is to reclaim your humanity so you can be totally in the world even while you're going beyond it. Your path is difficult. It goes two different directions. One is back into the humanity, and the other is transcending humanity and finding levels of consciousness in you that you didn't know existed. Levels of bliss, levels of self-knowledge, of self-realization, of knowing oneself as God, And knowingness itself, pure knowingness, just knowing without any objects known, knowing pure love without any objects of love. On the other hand, we have to go inwards and be also a human. In this case, we know specific things about ourselves and others. We have love with specific others and ourselves. It becomes personal. Our spiritual knowledge becomes personal. And everything hurts more as a human being. If you have a cat or dog that dies, you feel it 100%. If you have a parent that dies, you feel it 100%. If you have somebody that cuts in front of you on the freeway, maybe for the first time in your life, you allow yourself to be rageful. You let it come out, and it scares the hell out of you when you first come out. For the first time, you're not afraid, you feel rage, and it shocks you. You may even shout at the other driver. And you're shocked by your own violence, your own anger. And more feelings and emotions come up. And each time you get more shocked by what's inside of you. This is a difficult path because you're walking one path towards divinity. The self-realization I talk about, where the self comes from deep within and reveals herself or itself to you as this divine light and infinite power of Kundalini, infinite power of the Shakti, where it's like 1,000 atomic bombs and you feel the life of the world inside of you because you are the life. You are the sentience. You are that which brings all this into existence. I have another student up here, a devotee who's looking in, listening to Satsang. That's Radha. Right now she's looking pretty critically at you guys. I think she doesn't want you here, so I'll hide you guys from her. So, let's get a little more specific. One of the most common feelings that people who first come to me, who have been practicing spirituality a long time, is either deadness, emotional deadness, or depression. They've had some successes in their spiritual life, but something has gone wrong. There's no progress, no enlightenment, no bliss, or else there's only bliss and there's a feeling that there's no depth. And this means, inevitably, that they have to start exploring their emotions. And when emotions start coming out after they've been buried for a long time, people tend to get disconcerted, frightened, depressed, angry, and uncontrollably emotional at times. And they think something is wrong. They may even think that they're going crazy. But it's part of the path. Some people have to go to the hospital. Some people become so dysfunctional they can't feed themselves. Sometimes it's due to an excessive amount of bliss, and all that they feel is this ecstatic bliss, and they don't want to move, to take a bite, even to move their toe, because they feel they'll lose the bliss. They feel at the highest point in their life so far in terms of ecstasy and bliss, and they don't want to move and ruin it. This is like, I guess, Ramana was for many years, where he just sat on the floor of the temple in the basement and was covered with bugs and didn't eat. People had to force feed him. He didn't want to move. He was in so much bliss. But that's not always tolerated. If you have friends and family, they'll take you to the funny farm for a while, where you get to be totally dysfunctional as long as you want, or until the money runs out. and then they kick you out. Or at some point you decide, I don't want to be in the booby hatch anymore. It's fun, but all the good feelings are passing, and I need to get out there and work and do this and do that. So you start acting normally so you can get taken out of the booby hatch, the mental hospital, and re-participate in life. Many of you feel as if the ones that are most active, the ones that are fizzing right now, where the energies are really tearing away at your heart. You feel like, oh, you're always on the edge of going nuts or going insane or becoming dysfunctional because of the intensity of the newness of the experiences coming up, of becoming totally unleashed, free to express and to feel everything. And although the emotions can sometimes appear to be very raw, just the rawness of them is so ecstatic compared with ordinary bliss of God. There's something about feeling totally as a human being, the rawness emotion of loss, of death, of fear, extraordinary fear, of hopelessness, or of love so sublime and so deep that your heart breaks open every moment, sheerly from the intensity of the love. It's that kind of intense love that draws the self into exploring or exploding into you and revealing itself to you. It's a hard path because it's complicated. There are no simple rules. And I just don't restrict people to their true self, whatever that is, or to Parabrahman, the absolute witness, or even to Atman, the absolute self, but also the totality of feelings, the totality of thoughts. So much of spirituality, Eastern spirituality, is about quieting the mind, destroying the ego. And people work endlessly at destroying their mind. But it's the mind that's trying to destroy the mind, so there's no destruction that takes place. Or they go deep into emptiness by looking within and searching into that emptiness for a self or for an ego. And there's none to be found, because it's not an object. The self itself is the subject that's looking for the self. And self-realization is when the self that is looking for self finds itself by having the self reveal itself to you, the seeker. It sounds complicated, but it's not. But the emotional part is the hard part. I left home. I left a PhD program at Wayne State University in order to become a wandering monk. I went to the desert, and then I went to Philip Kapleau in New York at age 26, I think it was, looking for all of these things. And all this I got was, you might say, one kind of, what do they call those? Culture after another. The Japanese dealt with emotions differently than Westerners. Zen people within the Japanese tradition dealt with emotions even more severely by discounting them altogether, and you just watch them. And you just interact with the universe one-to-one in the here and now, rather than to use the intermediary of feelings to arbitrate between the desires of your heart and your body and what the world will provide for you. You got rid of the feelings and just interacted directly with the world, more or less having feelings totally unconscious and acting out for you. Or you go to Robert, and people like Robert, who said, ignore the world. Pay no attention to the world. It's not real. You're not real either. You do not persevere. You do not sustain. You're not real. And again, what's meant is that the reality of you, the reality of the world, is actually sort of hollow. It's just a perception, and you can see the emptiness of the background permeating all thoughts, all emotions, even your sense of body in the external world. And you can truly say, after this many years of practicing meditation, emptiness is form, form is emptiness. Feeling, thought, and consciousness are also like this. All of them are here. They come on a spring out of emptiness, out of nothingness. They exist for a moment and then they pass away. Emotions, feelings, thoughts, consciousness itself is like this. It arises in the morning, passes away in the evening. Everything is temporary. The only thing that is unchanging is you. Now, for Ramana, that means the base of consciousness. For Nisargadatta, it means the observer who's beyond consciousness. In any event, they escape their humanity to get into a state of sustained love and of peace. Mostly the talk is peace, that all problems are resolved and you find peace. I was never interested in peace. I wanted to know what the nature of consciousness was, what the nature of self was. So those kinds of talks didn't appeal to where I was going. And then after doing it for about 13 years, my brother died. I broke up from a 7-year relationship and lost a lot of money in the stock market, all in 1978. Became very depressed. There was no spiritual solution for the depression. It was there. It was there. I watched it all the time, but it didn't help. It didn't dissipate. So I got into psychotherapy, and that psychotherapy would go for about 9 years until I graduated with a doctorate in clinical psychology in 1987, I think it was. I had one really great psychotherapist. His name was Eric. I had him for about 7 years, twice a week. I learned so much about me, the innards, about the forces within, the colors, the ideas, the images, thoughts, the nature of thinking, the nature of the heart. And I looked back at all the spirituality I had been in, and I looked at people and I saw how mostly they were using spirituality to run away from emotions rather than to seek the truth. They were using it as a denial of death, for example, a denial of depression, a denial of life. And the intensity of being human is too much for many people, because when you're really open to emotions, completely open and sensitive to them, they can be so ripping and violent that all you want to do is turn it off. Maybe to drink it down or to take medication to modulate the emotion so it becomes tolerable. Sindri is going through a growing process right now of being able to handle increasing intensities. And it comes in waves and goes away for a while, and it comes in waves. The same thing with Steve. Alsar so far hasn't been bothered too much by it. It's been the good feelings mostly coming up, not the bad feelings. The bad feelings start coming next week, Alsar, I promise. So you'll be in the bag with the rest of us. You too, Dinesh, you got a smile on your face, but I'm going to wipe it off next week. Now, in 1975, I was teaching Zen at UCLA Extension. And there was a woman that came to the class. Her name was Karima. And we became fast friends. She was in a relationship. And I think I was too, yes. She was fascinated by how insane I was, how off the wall I was, how flippant and condescending I could get, how angry I could make people and seem to deliberately like doing it. And then we got into a relationship in 1983, 1984. We moved in together. And Karima was the sweetest person you could possibly meet. She couldn't express anger if her life depended on it. And I knew this, I saw this, and I saw this as an imperfection. And over the years, I encouraged her to get more and more angry. We just had a talk about it yesterday. She was talking to Max about how mild-mannered she used to be until she met me. And gradually, the anger started coming out. The anger coming out. And then she was sort of bragging to Max about how she could get angry in traffic when somebody cut her off and rage at them, give them the finger, and how they would stop the car and come back at her, and she'd get scared and run away. But Karima's at a place now where she's a full woman. She won't tolerate a lot of abuse. She doesn't tolerate my abuse. And I try to abuse her a lot, and she abuses me back. She is a grown-up. She's not afraid of anger. She's not afraid of death. She's not afraid of hurting people if it's necessary. And she can defend herself from being hurt. And that's because we spend a lot of time together working on emotions. She went to the same psychotherapist, Eric, for years. And we knew how to deal with each other. Working on emotions always, even within the spiritual context. You see, it's so difficult to come into spirituality expecting to transcend humanity and to become a Buddha floating 3 feet off the ground, talking in terms of Buddha things like from the ground above to the sky above, I am the only one, and to spend 15 years exploring that as a koan, to instead getting enraged when somebody tries to take the TV changer away from you, and you fight about it, you squabble about it, rather than being equiminded and say, oh sure, sweetie, you can have whatever you want. And to work out in a give and take situation how to live in everyday life. I remember Maizumi Roshi. He was the most courageous of all the Japanese Roshis that I knew, in the sense he was able to be vulnerable about his emotional status. He used to have an alcohol problem. He would get enraged when he was drinking and do ridiculous things, and then apologize for it for the next 2 weeks in Satsang. I remember one time he came into the Zendo being helped by 2 people, and he had a cast on his right foot, I think it was, almost up to his knee. He had gotten drunk, and the woman in the apartment below him, he owned the whole building, apartment building, so it was a student, was playing something very loud, and he wanted to go to sleep. So he pounded the floor with his foot to get her to recognize that somebody was irritated. She was irritated. He was irritated with her playing something loud, and he broke his foot. And you know, he had to go to the doctor the next day and got it wrapped up in a cast. And he apologized to her and for his behavior for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just kept bringing it up, limping into the Zendo, and say how sorry he was. I'm sorry I betrayed, I made Zen look bad. I didn't live up to my role as a teacher. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. It won't happen again. But it did happen again. Only this time he had multiple affairs. And when I talked to him about it, we were very close at times, he said, my mistake was I did it because I could. And that's the only excuse he gave over and over again. I failed once again to be a good beacon for Zen. I failed the Sangha. I failed myself. And he would be very honest about his humility and his wanting to make up for what he did. So few teachers do that. Mostly they blame the student or they blame the organization, and they don't admit any problem on their part. Now, as Karima knows, Max knows, I have a temper. It doesn't usually come out except in situations like somebody cuts in front of me and I almost get killed. If they cut me off and give me 50 feet, I usually don't get angry. Or sometimes when Karima walks in the door and I'm quietly watching television, she starts screaming at me about everything that happened at work during the day, and I just want her to die so I could watch that program in peace. But she insists on talking to me even further about it. So I'll scream at her, shut the fuck up, leave me alone, goddammit. Leave me in peace. And she says, oh, I never get to talk to you, you never want to talk. So I'll wait 2 hours till she's watching television, and I'll say, Karima, what was it that you wanted to talk about? And she'd say, shh, 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 I'm watching this. We're all faulty human beings as much as we try to be like God or Buddha. We all have these follies. Mine is having a foul mouth and a temper. And I sort of enjoy it. Gets me in trouble though. Any number of times I've been threatened physically. Almost got into fights. But that's the way I am. It's never gone away. It's mollified. The older I get, the less angry I get, but the more grumpy I get, or tend to get. Even at the same time I'm feeling such absolute bliss. Now when people disturb me, they disturb my bliss and I get even more angry. Muktananda, the night before he died, two of his successors came into his room, and they were chatting on and on, arguing about something. That's Nityananda and Chitvilasananda. And he screamed at them, he says, leave me alone, I'm in the most subtle bliss, and you come and disturb me, get out of here. And Muktananda had a temper 10 times worse than mine. Next day he died. That's not because of his anger. But it was very typical of him to explode in anger, and the anger to last 30 seconds, and then it would all be over like it had never happened. He'd be loving and open until the next incident. He was like always adjusting, flowing from one emotional state to another, and he'd take on the emotional state of whoever was talking to them. If they were loving and open, he'd be loving and open. If they were angry, he'd get angry. One time, somebody was picking on him. One of the students was haranguing him from inside the satsang. Was a big satsang, maybe a heckler. And he said to the heckler, you think you're angry. He says, I have more anger in this little finger than you have in your entire body. Just keep it up, buddy. So, we're not producing Buddhas here because that's phony. I'll bet you Buddha kicked ass. And the Buddha we get in books, it's not the Buddha that was really there. Let me see. Right now I'm stumped for anything to say. Are there any questions? Any accusations? Any recriminations? Okay, let's have a chant. Let us go to okay. Under the Muktananda chants, the last one on the left. Narayana, Narayana, Jaya Govinda Hare. It says it's 10 minutes. Put your pointer on that little triangle, and at the count of 4, press it. Now, the same kind of emotional intensity I talk about having in terms of either bliss or of anger or of cussing, I want you to feel that same intensity as the chanting goes through you. Whatever it does to you, and it does different things to different people. Some people, this chant will make cry. Others, like Alan Chin, would have sometimes the most incredible hatred coming up in some of the chants. So the chants bring out emotions. They bring out in some bliss and in some different things at different times. We are always changing. Don't try to get to a steady state where everything is under control. That's the worst place to be. You want to be always a little bit out of control, because you're far more sensitive to things that are going on than when you're contented and peaceful. So, at the count of 4, Narayana, Narayana, Jaya Govinda Hare. 1, 2, 3, 4. With intensity. Now, as a continuation, I hear it over and over and over again. People say, watch out for Ed. He'll cook you. And it's never clear what this cooking is that I'm doing to people. I call it being me. Some people have referred to me as a drama queen. Others as exceptionally emotional, as a liar. What else? You won't believe the things Edgy does to people. Well, I tell stories about Robert, and everybody assumes the stories I tell about Robert, I also do, the cooking. I'm just being me. For example, I encourage everybody to be open with their feelings. Openly express their feelings to each other rather than to go behind each other's backs and to be in the background tearing each other down. A lot of people prior to 4 or 5 months ago, if they had any negative feelings about me, which would be engendered because everybody was always talking about me anyway, the kind of things that I did, they would bring up their doubts to Dia or Matthew, and it used to be to the Chins about Ed's absurd behavior in his cooking, etc. And it caused a lot of problems because there was in the background all of these negative stuff about me going on, about what a rotten person I am, or how untrustworthy I am, or what a liar I am, or all this kind of stuff. So I encourage people to be open with me. So a few of them have started expressing their concerns about me. And kind of saying, aren't you doing this wrong? Aren't you doing that wrong? Didn't you do this? Didn't you do that? Until the place it gets me really pissed off. They expect me to be open and lovingly accept their criticism. Well, I didn't say I was going to be like a mat, while they're ragging me out for every conceivable crime they could imagine. I get pissed too, and I yell back. Matter of fact, Charlie, I yelled at Karima one night. It was a big argument about a donut. And I was screaming at her. I guess that's how everybody else would say it was. That's what Charlie would say. And she would yell back or say, "Stop that, stop yelling." And she used to be the one that yelled all the time. And I just learned it from her, right, Karima? You were the one that started it? Anyway, Charlie, the next 2 nights later in the car, Charlie from Spain, Charlie Aranachala, said, you act like an asshole sometimes. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the way you yell at Karima, it makes me angry. And he goes on and on. He just gets into it, starts digging and pushing it more and more about how angry I made him by being angry with Karima and yelling at Karima. And he said, over a fucking little donut. It would have been okay, I guess, had it been over a bar of gold. But because it was over a donut, it was not okay to yell. So I began getting more upset with Charlie, and I gave him back some of the same anger he was directing towards me, and he quieted down. Because, as Muktananda says, I have more anger in this one little finger than he had in his whole body. He's just learning how to be angry. I'm an expert at being angry. And the next day he said, thank you, Ed. It was so much fun to get angry. So much fun to get angry and to let it out and to be in a safe situation to let out the anger. So that's my cooking. It's, how does the other saying go? Come to a teacher with doubts and you'll find all kinds of reasons to doubt. He'll give you reasons to doubt. But if you come with openness and love, you'll get back it tenfold. So I kind of react to how people come to me as much as what they say or the way they say it. You can see a troublemaker coming from miles away, the way they take pot shots at you, or the way they criticize you on Facebook, or leave doubts about, they'll show or express that they have doubts about the trueness of your understanding. And for them, I can feel it. I can feel their doubts, I can feel their tip of the tongue ability to react to anything and to go off. It's so easy to set them off, and I just love setting them off sometimes and watching them flame out on Facebook. At other times, I hold my peace. I leave the cooking only for close-ups, only for the people that get close to me, because they just have to react with an emotional person. I hold nothing back, or very little back. Now, another thing. Sasaki recently, he's 105. He's had a center here since 1962. So it's 52 years. 2 years ago, he began getting criticized for having spent 50 years of abusing the women in his Sangha. Apparently, he'd been doing it for 50 years, and it only became a deal when he couldn't do it any longer. There were a lot of accusations about how he was inappropriately sexual with his students, his female students. He would touch them or grab a breast or something like that, and he had an affair with a couple of students over the period of time, and everybody was saying, oh my God, this old fart doing this for all these years. My point of view was, everybody knew about it when I was with Sasaki. Everybody in the organization knew about it. All the women knew about it going into it. They were warned what it was like to be with Sasaki. At Mount Baldy, let me say, is the coldest place on earth during the winter when we have a winter training session. First of all, it drops down to -7 below 0 Fahrenheit. And then the Zen culture, the Zen Japanese culture, is even colder than the weather. There's no emotion expressed there. It's just intense anger or intense ignoring of any feeling whatsoever. And as Sasaki would tell me later, there's no love in Zen. Well, there was a double standard in Zen, at least Sasaki Zen. Almost all of the women during the Sangha, or the, what do you call it? Sanzen is when you ring a little bell, he rings a little bell, and you go up to his house, you bow to him 3 times and tell him what your koan is and what your answer to the koan is. Let me tell you something else. It's very cold. There was a lot of snow that winter, and the guys were awakened at 3:30 in the morning to go out and shovel the snow if it was snowing. The girls were never wakened up to do this. The girls all got to be in the sewing shack or in the administrative headquarters. They didn't get out in the cold and didn't do hard physical work. Well, I learned how to avoid having to get up at 3:30 and shovel the snow, which is to get up at 3:15 and go up to the Zendo and do meditation, because they felt I was so strong in my practice that they didn't want to disturb my meditation by making me shovel heavy snow in the cold at 3:30 in the morning. So I learned how to go into create my own sewing room within the Zendo culture. But Sasaki, with guys, would give them a koan, like the first one he always gave us, how do you realize God when looking at a fir tree? The girls, he'd say, why don't you sit in my lap? And they just cuddle with each other. And maybe he'd be a little sexual with them, maybe be a lot sexual with them, I don't know, but everybody knew about it. There was a double standard. The women got to sit in his lap and being in the sewing room and being in the warmth and in the administrative room, and the guys were out with doing the snow stuff, doing the dirty work, pickup and cutting logs and all of that kind of crap, suffering, and then given the stupid koans to resolve. He was cuddling the women, and the men got the usual concentration camp behaviors. And I can understand that there's a difference in approach between men and women. I don't fault him for that approach. Nobody faulted him for that approach. Nobody complained too much. They say in retrospect, we complained, but nobody listened to us. But you can't have something like that go on for 50 or 60 years and only become a problem when he can't do it anymore. There is something about being in that extremely cold and ruthlessly cold environment and the ruthlessly cold Japanese culture that somebody shows some warmth towards you, your heart can open so easily. And with guys, it was just a mental approach, just answering the koans and becoming emptiness. And for the women, it was more a warmful acceptance by daddy or whoever else with a little sexuality thrown in, a little flirtatiousness. But I could see that there's a real reason for this. These men and women are different in how they approach spirituality and they approach life and everything else, and the koans wouldn't work for them. I don't think they would. They didn't work for me a lot either. They were so easy, stupid kind of things. I would much prefer to have sat on Roshi's lap and have him fondle me than having to go out and shovel the fucking snow at 3:30 in the morning. But I didn't get that. And I'm pissed at Sasaki. I had to lodge my own complaint now. Why didn't I get fondled? Why didn't I get to sit in Roshi's lap? The other thing is, Maizumi Roshi. We were all told that Maizumi Roshi died of a heart attack. But he died of his weakness, which was alcohol. The real story is he got really drunk one night. He was with several people in a sauna. They left. And he went to sleep and drowned in the sauna in an alcoholic stupor. And yet, he was brilliant. He was sensitive. He could work emotional nuances with people that the more strict teachers like Sasaki or Sansanim didn't even touch, because they were, especially Sansanim, everybody was put into a 38 regular jacket of Dharma talk, of instructions, of philosophy, and there was no room for the human. There was no room for feelings. You couldn't talk to Sansanim much about feelings. And Sasaki just would turn red. You talk about love, he would just turn red and say, there's no love in Zen. But Maizumi was open to it, and it killed him, because he was in a conflicted culture, one where it was not accepted, and one where being open was something new for him and for his culture and for Zen, as a matter of fact. And Robert too. Robert was always chasing women in the Sangha, one after another. And he'd get exposed one after another in the Sangha. I told this one story about at the time, at the end of the Sangha, with their question and answer period, one woman raised her hand and said, "Robert, why did you stick your tongue down my throat?" That's all. Everybody was shocked. What was? And she repeated, "Robert, why did you stick your tongue down my throat?" And Robert was frozen. And then he finally said, "Because I thought you needed it." And you know, I don't think that was just a discounting. I really thought that he thought that that emotional acceptance was important for her at that particular time. A therapist has to deal with that too by giving verbal reassurance, and you have to avoid the physical reassurance altogether by professional standards. And I think in the sense that weakens it. But they're all dealing with people with emotional problems, and they do it differently. Men are much more harshly treated in the Eastern traditions. It's more intellectual, it's more about emptiness, about the witness, about jnana. And women, it's more about bhakta and opening and flowering from a position of love. And that's why what I do is kind of irregular, because I come from that jnana tradition, the emptiness tradition, the witness tradition, the simpleness where everything is simplified into the true self, which is beyond human. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Feeling, thought, and consciousness are also like this. To one where I have to be emotionally receptive to everybody, to feel your feelings and to see feel what's really going on inside of you and meet you there. And I usually give the same introductory instructions for all. Read the Nisargadatta Gita, listen to sacred chanting, try to locate the sense of self, the sense of I am somewhere in your heart, near your heart area. Let it grow, abide in it, tease it, flirt with that feeling, invite it into your heart, let it grow with stronger and stronger until you start feeling the subtle body energies moving through you, and then the Kundalini and the Shakti moving through you strongly, where it takes over your spiritual training, so to speak. But the emotional core issues are there from the beginning of your training to the end of it, may never be totally resolved, but you can become functional with them. But like I pointed out, Robert's way in the recent post on Facebook and on the blog, is that Robert's way led to suicide for many. They went inside, they went deep, and they didn't find his bliss. They just found deadness, and they felt trapped in the deadness, and they couldn't get out. And I've been told by so many people that are thankful that I brought them out of the deadness of what self-inquiry done without love can do. It can make you feel dead. You go inside, you go into that emptiness deeper and deeper, looking for the I am, and you get lost in the emptiness. And there's no feelings in that emptiness. There's no affect, there's no love, there's no hate. And what there is it robs you of the emotional strength to do anything. You become a zombie. A lot of Zen ashrams, or Zen centers, can be zombie centers. They turn out zombies that speak the same language, that challenge you with cuts and other kinds of stylistic ways of responding without really dealing with the feelings at all. I'm more gentle. I get angry. That's a joke. Laugh. That's better. This kind of spirituality is very difficult because it's extremely complicated. It means dealing with human feelings, with the failure to development of internal self-structures, of feeling fear, depression, anxiety, anger, as well as what do you do when the bliss gets so strong you don't want to move? What do you do when the ecstasies are so strong you don't want to move? What do you do when the energies are moving through you as brilliant lights rising from your stomach, coming up through the heart, into the head and above, and out through the hands, and you can feel the energy going outwards and influencing the universe around you. And other people can feel it too. They can feel your sense of presence. You can project your sense of presence into them at a distance. You can learn how to use these energies to heal and become a healer, either remote or hands-on healing. There's so much to learn. It's a never-ending path. It's not like the neo-Advaitins on Facebook who says, just look inside for 5 minutes, see that you see no self, recognize that you have no self, that's all you have to do. Just abide there now, in the nowness for the rest of your life. They have made no progress whatsoever. They will not go deeper into themselves. Going deeper means to feel the subtle body energies which are underneath the physical body, and to deal in that subtle body with the emotional layer too. The emotional layer is so very important and totally missed by the Eastern spirituality structures, except for those who are into Tantra and others, where they use these kinds of erotic feelings or desires of any kind of thing. Desire for a puppy, it could be used into creating the kind of energy that purifies the body. But I think this purification nonsense is another bit of nonsense. It's not a matter of purifications, it's a matter of accepting yourself on all levels. Okay, I've talked to you about all the secrets now. The flip side, the downside of spirituality. Are there any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Eric. Got to turn your microphone on. If you don't have a microphone, you can type it out and somebody can read it. Yes? Okay, sure. Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead. Yes? How long? How long? And who was that? That was what? Are you making love to your dog? Oh, he's making love to you. Is it erotic nudging? But go ahead with your question. Thank you. Oh, no. I'm just kidding, of course. But you can do Atman Vichara, but do it correctly. Not like Robert said, to ask yourself, who am I? And then wait in silence for a response. And when the response comes, ask where the response comes. That'll just kill you. But do Atma Vichara by looking inside for the I am sensation near the heart. Pay attention to it. Love it. Play with that sensation within the I am. Love it. What would you say? Invite it into your heart. Invite it to take over. Listen to sacred music, sacred chanting as often as possible. Do it while you're looking for the I am and feeling that love. Robert didn't put enough love into the Atma Vichara. If you have love along with it, it makes it all so easy. Read the Nisargadatta Gita, especially the sections about following the I am. It brings life instead of emptiness. But of course I'll be your teacher. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. Oh. Don't worry about it. The thing is, you have to experience the causal body in many, many different ways. But when you're in the causal body, there's no experience. So there's absolutely no way you can find your way outside of the causal body. You can't hang on to the I am anymore. You're not aware of the I am. You're not aware of yourself. You're not aware of consciousness. You're not aware of anything. So it's you can't do anything. It has to happen by itself. What does happen is if you're practicing the Atma Vichara of staying with the I am with love and feeling the subtle body energies also arising. When you start loving the I am, the subtle body energies will automatically start arising. If you love somebody else very strongly and you can feel how you love that person, then you look inside and you find that that love is inside of you. You have created that love by thinking about that object, that person. So you are the creator of your own love inside That love is you. That is your possession. That comes from the depths of you. It comes from at many levels, including the deepest level of Turiya. If you hold on to that love, and then when you're aware of the I am, turn that love around and direct it towards the I am sensation. It's like marrying the I am sensation. And that's what causes Turiya, the Atman, Satchitananda, the divine self, to want to reveal itself to you, because it feels that you love her or it, and feels like she is coming to her lover, her human lover, who loves her as God, the goddess, or whatever sex you want to put it. But if you use the love directed towards the I am, the love you feel towards somebody else directed towards the I am, and she feels beckoned to call and come from below the causal body, and at first it seems to explode out of your gut as immeasurable light moving upwards through your heart, into your throat, into your head and beyond, and out your hands, blinding light. Or sometimes as the descent of golden grace, where you feel so humbled because you feel so welcomed by God that everything is forgiven and you feel totally pure of any kind of responsibility or guilt that you've ever had about anything. Or else you feel so small and useless. All that you want to do is be at the feet of God and serve God in any small way you can. And the forces are so immense, the energies are so immense, the presence of God is so immense that you feel it's the other, because it can't possibly be you. It's more power than you've ever experienced before. But then something tells you all along that this is me. This divine aspect, this God that's revealing itself, is really me. And all this has to do is happen to you once. It lasts maybe, like for Robert, a couple of hours. And I had it experienced 4 or 5 times. Every time it happens to you, it leaves a residue of self with which you can identify all the time. You've gone deeper then. You've gone into Turiya. You've gone into the Atman, the human soul, so to speak. And that's how you do it, just by loving. But when you're in the causal body, there's nothing you can do. You can only do something before you're in the causal body, which is to love. Love the I am. Take the love for a squirrel and turn it into yourself. By the way, what is the relationship between, what is her name? Vandana and you? Is she a relation of you? Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, and you live in New York, and she lives in Africa. Okay, I just wanted to know. Welcome, Vandana, here. How do you pronounce her name? How do I pronounce it? Oh, Sarah, how do I pronounce your mom's name? Vandana. Welcome, Vandana. Glad you could come to Satsang and see your son shine. He's brilliant. He's brilliant with the violin, and he's brilliant with emotions. Someday he will be a great teacher. Half as good as me, maybe. Just kidding. Another little sense of humor there thing. Anyway, I love you all. Let's have one final chant, unless there's another question. Eric, can you get your mic working? Vandana, do you have something to ask? Sharada has one. Type it in. Sharada, type your question in. In the meantime, okay. Sharada, I have a question, but she hasn't typed any question. That's all right, Vandana. Anyway, let's have one final chant and then we'll just fade away into emptiness. Let's do Kali Durga. It's the fourth from the last chant on the left-hand side. It's, I guess that's Kali Durga. Wait a second. Yeah, it's, Kali Durga. Ma. Jai Ma, Kali Durga Ma, 9 minutes. And it's the fourth from the last chant on the bottom, on the left-hand side. At the count of 4, it's Kali Durga. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sharada asked a question, and it's an important one, so I'll answer it. Why is it the subtle body experiences take a long time to deepen and stabilize, but the feelings in the emotional level seem inexhaustible? They deepen and intensify, but don't ever seem to exhaust. Well, you might say that emotions are permanent, and so are subtle body experiences, but they both take a little to get used to. Emotions, when they first come out after they've long been repressed, are chaotic, explosive. Sometimes they go away for a period of time, then they explode on you, and you don't know how to handle it. But they do stabilize. Then they become like psychological fingers that reach out and touch the world. And you get a feeling, and it's directly from the heart. These emotions, you just see and feel the world around you, not from your mind so much, but from your heart. And these feelings tell you a lot about the world, how dense it is, how dangerous it is, how light it is, how joyous it is, what's going on at that particular time. It's like spiritual tentacles reaching out from the heart and touching the environment around. And you don't have to use your senses so much because it's all coming from your heart as these emotions become like a blind person's cane, reaching out and touching the environment, feeling it out, feeling where it's safe, where it's not safe, etc. They're like fingers of a cat's whiskers that senses the world around it. And that's what emotions are. They're permanent once they settle down. Once you've accepted them and been with them, they tell you about the world. Now, the subtle body energies, most people don't have them their entire lives. They develop them age 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, whenever they start working on them. And it can take a long time to deepen them, as Shada said. Some people, they explode on them almost right away. And it's just that with each person it's different. If you want to deal with the subtle body energies, you can do it in multiple ways. One is to develop it for healing and become a healer, Reiki or a quantum touch healer or the Wonder Method or many of the other methods, all the methods out there, meridian energies and chi energies. And you can spend a dozen years to develop the facility at working these energies out. But it does require work, just as the emotional work requires work too. Work in the sense of working these through. Let the emotions coming through. Let the emotions take you over. Let them come through your heart. And after this happened enough times, when you felt hatred deep enough and love deep enough and anxiety deep enough and fear deep enough, they don't bother you as much when they come. You note them after a while. And you note what they're telling you about the world. And you note after a while whether they're telling you the truth or not. So a lot of times the feelings are wrong at first. They make you paranoid, or you're scared of something environment, when in fact there's nothing to be scared of except the fear within you has mixed these emotions with fear. But when they become purified through investigation and use, you use them as feelers for the world. They become an extension of you, reaching out into the world. The same thing with subtle body energies. They can reach out too. And you can learn the world directly from the heart through subtle body energies, through the energetic body, as well as through emotions. You might say that they're extensions of the physical body, of knowledge of the world directly to your heart. Sharada, just keep going. I've talked to you a few times recently, and it seems like you're suffering from an excess of fearfulness about both the energies and the world around you. And let that fear come, work with it. And if you want to talk to me about it sometime, please do so. Anyway, it's been a long satsang today. I love you all. Next week begins our retreat. We'll probably still have a satsang online next Sunday at the same time, but I don't know what it's going to be like. I'll probably be totally buzzed. In any event, some of you I'll be seeing during this coming week for the retreat, and some of you I'll see next Sunday. Take care, and I love you all. Except for Alsar, and except for Dinesh, and except for Eric, and except for Rick, and except for Max, etc., etc. Just kidding. Take care. Love you all. Bye-bye.